Hey guys, it's Liz again. Today we're going to be covering Chapter 3, Section 1. And right now we're looking at the chapter preview, which talks about how the brain is just like a machine that allows us to interpret everything that surrounds us. First, we're going to define the word mind, which is a process going on in the brain that includes all thoughts and feelings. If we scroll down a little bit, we're going to see that we go into the subject of neuroscience, which is the study of the nervous system. And the brain is made up of 1 billion cells known as neurons, or also called nerve cells, but we're going to call them neurons. And they build up the nervous system. And they also process information, making up the nervous system. And if you look here, you're going to see what a neuron looks like. We have the dendrites that receive information. You have the cell body that surrounds the nucleus, and then you have the axon, where the action potential travels down, and at the end of the axon you have the axon terminals that send off the information to the postsynaptic neuron. And I basically just defined all of those for you. But then you have glia, which are also called like glia cells, and the brain has like a lot of glia cells that regulate the strength of connections between neurons. They help like make the neurons stronger and the signals that go between the neurons stronger. A neurotransmitter is a chemical used by a neuron to transmit information to another cell. Neurons communicate with each other at synapses. A synapse is a specialized junction where the axon terminal of a neuron communicates with another cell. The synaptic cleft is a tiny fluid-filled gap between a neuron's axon terminal and another cell. That is where the communication happens. There are vesicles, which are microscopic spheres in a neuron that contain a neurotransmitter molecule that is released into the synaptic cleft. And then there's the neurotransmitter receptors that are large protein molecules embedded in the cell membrane to which neurotransmitters can bind to. It's important to know that a chemical or electrical signal is only traveled in one direction through a neuron. And it's also kind of cool because the neurotransmitter's receptors are only specific to a certain type of transmitter. Neurotransmitters transfer information across synapses. This is kind of what a synapse looks like. This is my favorite picture because here you see the vesicles that release the neurotransmitters that connect to the receptors that are specific to that neurotransmitter, and that is how the information is processed. And this is the postsynaptic cell, and this is the presynaptic cell. And there are a lot of different types of neurotransmitters. We can start off with acetylcholine, which is a neurotransmitter used by many parts of the nervous system. And it's kind of used to make muscles contract, and it's used for a lot of reasons. You have glutamate, and it's a common neurotransmitter in the brain that usually causes neurons to be more active. You have GABA. It's a neurotransmitter, in contrast to glutamate, usually reduces the activity in neurons. You have endorphins that are used to damp down pain signals. Serotonin, that's a very common one. A lot of people know that one. It's made by neurons in the base of the brain that send their axons throughout the brain and spinal cord. Serotonin excites some neurons and inhibits others. It also affects mood, and enhancing serotonin signaling relieves depression in some people. You have norepinephrine, not really sure how to pronounce that, and it is released by certain neurons to speed heart rate, breathing, and neuronal activity as part of the fight or flight response. Dopamine, another famous one, is another neurotransmitter that is important to the brain's control of movement, also signaling pleasure from a wide variety of stimuli. and drugs that interfere with dopamine signaling in the brain relieve some of the symptoms of schizophrenia. Let's scroll down here. Oop, I think I missed a definition. Oh, there we go. First, the axon terminal that releases the neurotransmitter molecules soon actively gathers them up to again later. This process is called reuptake, and it's important that the synaptic cleft is clear of all the neurotransmitters before each new signaling process happens. There are three types of functional types of neurons. First, you have the motor neuron that sends commands to make muscles move. These are different types of neurons. So then you also have a sensory neuron that are sensitive to physical events. You also have interneurons, a neuron that receives input from and sends output to other neurons. A reflex is a simple behavior that is automatically triggered by a particular stimulation without or conscious effort. And just like that's how neurons work, it's just a reflex. You don't think about it, you don't know what's really happening, you don't plan it, it just happens, and if it's affected by our outside stimuli. In this picture, it defines what a simple reflex is. Like when you touch a hot object, it sends a signal to your brain, and a neuron sends a signal back telling you to release your hand, whether you like it or not. All reasonably complex behavior is controlled by a neural network, a wide-ranging scattering of many neurons communicating with one another to process information. Now, section 3.2 is called the nervous system at work. Every cell in your body is a tiny battery. You have ions that are charged particles, and some ions are negatively charged and some are positively charged. Any difference in charged particles is called polarization. We can also say that it is polarized. If we make a hole in the cell membrane, positively charged ions will be pulled in because opposite charges attract. A potential difference in charge is the measure of the tendency for charged particles to move from one place to another, usually reported in volts. In neurons, a potential difference in charge across the cell membrane is called a membrane potential. When neurons are not being stimulated by other neurons, they have a resting potential. The neuron is at a resting potential when there is no stimulation going across the neuron. Neurons use electrical signals to summarize information from many synapses. Alright, and that's it for today, guys. Thank you so much.